You know, maybe the reason my videos keep getting demonetized is because somebody at YouTube is a tank main. I am too hard on tank players, to be honest. It's not their fault that they like the champions they like. If we're being frank here, I don't really hate the idea of tanks in general. The role that tanks fill is something that I think is very healthy and can be balanced when done properly. I don't even hate all tanks in League of Legends, just a specific few that outclass all the others. If you have guaranteed engage that actually takes zero skill to use, either because you have a point and click engage or guaranteed combo setups, that's a big issue that breaks the class in my opinion, but there are a few tanks in League that I think are very well balanced and super fun to play. So today I'm going to do something a little bit different and hopefully a bit more positive. I'm going to talk about my favorite tank, the only tank that I bothered to get Champion Mastery 7 on, and my favorite to both watch in competitive play and play myself in solo queue. That tank is of course none other than Malph. The thumbnail of this video probably spoiled it. So Malph is an unusual tank for a few different reasons, but overall I'd say he's my ideal dream version of what a tank should be in League. The reason for it is there's a few things that I absolutely love about how his kit works that isn't really something you see in any other tank's kit for other top lane tanks in League. Firstly, he doesn't have guaranteed setups. He has a point and click ability with his Q, but that's about it. Everything else is a skill shot or something that has to have a little bit of thought put into it to use properly. His E and W are both super effective if your opponent is letting you use their full durations on them, but that's bad play on your opponent's part. Against a good opponent who's careful around these abilities, you have to think a lot during the laning phase. There's no guaranteed setups to engage and harass. Your opponent has the threat of killing you and poking you down little by little, particularly if your ult is down so you have no gap closer. So this leaves a little bit of a push and pull style to the lane where you always have to be on your toes looking for an engage, since your engages pretty much rely on your opponent messing up a little bit, where you then capitalize. Malphite's E in particular I think is a great ability. It's a hugely powerful ability that's very annoying to deal with since it gives this massive auto attack speed slow, but to use it aggressively that can be a little bit tough since you don't always have an easy engage if your ultimate is down, and your opponent can just kind of kite you and run away with no movement ability other than a slight movement speed increase with your Q. This means if you're constantly running towards your opponent and they're constantly running away to make sure that you don't use your E on them, then you have a little bit of a game here where you can zone them with the threat of the E to gain CS and lane pressure, but this is also one of your abilities where you want to use it to farm for yourself. Using your E to clear big minion waves is a very useful thing to do, but when you do that, then it goes on cooldown and your opponent gains lane pressure again and can start forcing you away. It's a really interesting dynamic and a series of mind games that both players have to think about when they're playing in a lane with Malphite, but overall it's this great, hugely powerful ability that fits perfectly into a tank's kit, but unlike many other tank abilities out there in League, this is not a very easy ability to land. Now, because of all of these shortcomings in Malphite's kit, against an opponent who's perfect and amazing and doesn't make any mistakes, they're likely never going to let you solo kill them, especially in the early game laning phase, probably only ever dying if your jungle comes up for a gank or something, and that might sound like a little bit of a boring lane where you're not getting any kills and you're just kind of playing passively, but that's what a lane should be for tanks. You're playing this crazy scaling champion that goes into this invincible late game where you can 1v5 and never die with all this awesome teamfight power, so you need to have some weakness in your game to balance out that scaling, and a tough laning phase does exactly that. Conversely, you do have issues in your own play in laning phase, and you can be poked down if you misplay. There's no free healing or goofy safety net that's going to help you if you misplay early, and that leads to my second point. Malphite has extreme scaling. The earlier you are into game, the worse off you are as a champion. It can be super easy, particularly for ranged or mage characters, to harass you and damage threatening for kills. Without your ultimate too, in that hyper early game, you don't have an engaged tool to fight back, and you're pretty much a sitting duck in the lane, which can make the very first phase of the game incredibly difficult and frustrating to deal with. But if you can get by without giving your opponents any kills, then you get rewarded with this insane mid and late game where you hit this invincibility status. It's difficult to get to that late game though as Malphite. A lot of other tanks have a lot of safety nets to make their laning super easy, most notably some sort of healing. This comes from an era where Riot believed that they needed to give every top laner in the game some sort of sustain mechanic, and it was during this run of releasing champions where it was because everyone thought that top lane was so isolated and vulnerable you needed to sustain to be able to AFK farm your heart out, so there's a ton of tops in the game that have some sort of natural sustain built into their their kit, including tanks, and I really hate it, especially on tanks. Tanks are the one role that you shouldn't get an easy laning phase. The laning needs to be tough at first because the reward of you being able to jump into a team fight and never die late game has to be balanced out around that weak early game. I keep repeating myself on this point in multiple videos at this point, but it's really something that Riot seems to forget every once in a while. If you farm as well as every other top laner in the game, but you outscale all of them, and on top of that, your farming is super easy because any poke and harass you take can just be healed through natural sustain with your abilities, then why would you ever pick any other champion in game? But finally, the best part about Malphite, and the thing that really makes him my favorite tank, is his ultimate. His ultimate is a unique ability in League of Legends in that it's a skill shot that isn't really a skill shot. Like, it's got a large enough radius that you can't really miss it. It's about as guaranteed CC as any other ability, where you've really got to be playing poorly to ever not land this on somebody. Some good players can of course flash out of it, but the thing that makes this ability so special is how patient you have to be with it to use it effectively in team fights. There's a kind of way where you can miss it without actually missing it. Look at this game for an example. Right here, I can ult this Lucian and pretty much guarantee a kill on him. He has no cleanse, no flash, nothing to escape it, and this could maybe win us the fight and eventually win us the game. After all, he is playing mid lane on the enemy team, so he's a major carry, and taking him out of this fight before the fight really starts, that would be hugely beneficial, but instead, I choose to be patient and save my ultimate a little while longer, where, lo and behold, a few moments later, I get a 3-person ultimate, which sets up for a great fight that ends up getting us all 3 of these kills eventually, and then winning the game. I could have used that ult on Lucian, and it would have been a mistake, which is a little bit weird. Even if I got that kill, and landed the ulti, and landed all my abilities, and used them perfectly to take out the enemy mid lane, that would have still been a mistake, and that's what I love about Malphite. This is something that's true for most all AoE CC abilities, but especially Malphite's ultimate, because it's so incredibly strong when it lands on multiple people, and it's so incredibly weak when it only lands on one person. It's pretty much the #1 deciding factor in whether you're winning or losing a team fight. Sometimes you find yourself in situations where you can land it on an AD carry or maybe AP carry or something, but that's not going to be enough, and you're going to lose the fight if you only get it on that carry. But if you land it on 2 people, or maybe 3, or maybe the entire enemy team, then you automatically win. This really makes the ability interesting, because even though a Bronze 5 player can land the ability, there's still a skill difference between an inexperienced Malphite who blows it all willy-nilly and a longtime veteran of the champion who will only use it in the most ideal situation. And I think that's what more tanks need to be built like. Tanks in general will always be a very forgiving class, since mispositioning isn't something that's possible for them. If they're so tough to kill and not really champions who want to be focusing anyway late game, then they're always going to have a very low skill floor as an entire class, but you can still design abilities in a way that will differentiate good tank players from bad ones. If you give point and click engages with guaranteed combos and not much room for diverse play, then no one's going to be able to tell the difference between a good player and a bad player if they all use the same simple combo. But that doesn't mean the role or idea of tanks is flawed. I just think they need to be implemented a little bit differently. But yeah, sorry to all the tank players who I have raked over the coals all these years. It's really nothing personal. I hope you can see where I'm coming from now. If you disagree with me and would like to do so in the comments down below, that's perfectly fine. Go right ahead. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video and hearing out my opinion. Short little announcement here before I go. I'm going to be streaming today as this video goes live, as well as every day for the rest of this week. I'm kind of weirded out by YouTube demonetizing everything I upload, and I mean, I really don't feel like sinking all my time into my YouTube channel this week if YouTube just doesn't care about me at all, if that makes sense. So I'm going to try and reform a bit and stream more often. I'm not going to stop making YouTube videos. I'm going to try and still get plenty of videos out while I'm streaming, but yeah, I want to focus a little bit more on streaming until YouTube gets their act together, because it's really demoralizing seeing how little YouTube seems to care about me. I may make an update video or something talking more about my plans for the future and giving you guys some more thoughts on all this if you're really curious as to what I think. But anyway, I hope you all enjoyed watching this video. I will see you all tomorrow, but until then, thank you very much for watching, good luck in solo queue, and have a wonderful day.